For years, internet gurus have been screaming in our ears about how busted high-level D&D is, but what nobody's really talking about are the mathematical and the mechanical reasons behind the issues that make basically half of even die-hard players shun the entire second half of D&D. And I know what some of you are thinking, my god, another D&D video? Why are we even still talking about this game after the OGL scandal? Some of you were done way back then. Well, the truth is, I like 5e, and it ain't a perfect game by any means, and that's what we're going to be getting into in this video, especially because the issues that I talk about in this video are going to negatively impact the next edition. Now, just because I hate Wizards of the Coast's most recent decision, and Hasbro as well, their most recent decisions with a burning, fiery, passionate hatred, that doesn't mean I'm going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So yes, I've been aware of every piece of controversy dealing with Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, their AI art, the OGL scandal. But do I still play D&D?
To this day! To this day! To this day!
As a passionate fan, I have to critique this system, especially since this DNA is going to be what's carried into the next edition of D&D, which comes out in 2024. So today I'll be stripping bare the mechanical design behind the most beloved TTRPG and demystifying its secrets for all of you at home. So full disclosure, I will be deep diving into D&D's maths in this video, checking the designer's homework, so to speak. You will need to bring your thinking cap and possibly an Advil or two for this one. Stay caffeinated. General consensus amongst pretty much everybody in the D&D community is that 5th edition, which is the most popular edition so far, by far, is like a rickety car held together by duct tape. At low levels, 5e feels great, but as speed increases and as there are more moving parts, the characters and the monsters become more powerful, the literal game engine grows unstable. Like it starts rattling and shaking and backfiring and shit. And by the time you're at 20th level, going as fast as possible with as many moving parts as possible, the game engine literally destroys itself and comes apart completely. It literally ceases to function. So then the question becomes, just what game engine actually powers 5th edition? And while some people would undoubtedly guess that it's the D20 system, which is correct after a fashion, to be specific, 5e uses an experimental iteration of the D20 system that Wizards of the Coast themselves have coined the Bounded Accuracy system. Bounded Accuracy is single-handedly the source of 5e's signature feel, as well as its perceived simplicity over its predecessors. However, it does come with a long list of detriments and drawbacks, which in game design we refer to as compromises. And what's even worse is that 5e's compromises are so numerous that they actually sabotage the original design intent of the experimental bounded accuracy engine and create a host of ills so vast, so egregious that most players literally eschew half the game. So then the question becomes, just how the fuck did they get it so wrong? Well, in true Brewmaster fashion, you know how we do here on Encounter, we're going to do away with the fluff and we're going to dive in real deep. And where better to start than with the literal design goals from the horse's mouth? Our designer here, Rodney Thompson, the writer of this article, gives us our first point in bold. Getting better at something actually means getting better at something. Since target numbers, DCs for checks, AC and so on, and monster accuracy do not scale with level, gaining a +1 bonus means you're actually 5% better at succeeding at the task, not simply hitting some basic competency level. So essentially, you're getting stronger in relation to everything else in the game. Strong characters hardly fail, while weak ones aren't made completely obsolete. This is actually a very solid design goal, and one that I like, because in my opinion, games that do scale with difficulty, such as Pathfinder, can feel like this endless treadmill where you're not getting any stronger. Because let's say I get a +20 to my armor class. Well, if the monster has a +20 to hit, then it's gonna really feel like I'm not gaining any ground there. I'm not getting any stronger. It's like a hamster wheel effect. However, as a pro GM who's run many games, there are several unintended consequences when this system isn't acted in play. The real issue comes down not to what they aim to do, because their design goal is fine. It really comes down to Wizards of the Coast's solution here, which is to cap all difficulties at 30. Now, this is an issue for two reasons. The very first reason is that 30 is this weird sort of arbitrary number. Why 30? If you think about it, a rogue, or many classes for that matter, especially if they have access to expertise, are capable of beating a 30 skill check around level 9, level 10. We're talking about halfway through the level up track. So if I'm already hitting what is the maximum difficulty halfway through my level ups, then what is the need for the last 10 level ups? Secondly, if I'm capable of rolling higher than 30, then why not make the cap higher than 30? Why not make it 35 or 40? Just having it be 30 really is strange, and it's like you can tell that this is an experiment. You can tell, and it is. Now, the second issue with this is that capping out the difficulty level means that there's only so hard that monsters can be, there's only so hard that checks can be, and this really robs your monsters of their mechanical and their mathematic distinction. And this is what I mean. Let's look at this CR2 Orog, okay? It has the same armor class as the CR23 Kraken, which just in of itself causes some cognitive dissonance. Designers wanted to keep the AC low so that the players feel like they're getting consistently stronger. That makes sense. But the first issue that instantly springs to mind to me is that if an attack roll represents how effectively you're attacking, and if an 18 represents the effort, the skill, the grit, the determination that it needs to deal damage, lethal damage, to this Orog in toe-to-toe combat, then it stands to reason that you would need a much higher roll than an 18 to damage or hit a creature that is more than 20 levels above this creature's level. But in 5e, the exact same armor classes that you're rolling against in the very, very early game are the exact same armor classes that you're rolling against in the late game. It is flat the entire game. The result is that as players level up, the bosses become trivialized, because by the time you're fighting a Kraken, you're going to be between levels 15 to 20. You'll have an attack bonus of between 10 to 15 against an armor class of only 18. Couple this with the player's increased ability to deal damage at higher levels, multiple attacks, action surge, you're going to find yourself in a situation where your monster's taking 8 attacks in a row, 80 to 90% chance to hit. But it actually gets even worse than that, because having a flat AC across the game results in yet another design sin, and this is probably one of the worst and biggest ones of all with this system. One that literally gets players killed at my table, and has before, because the most important metric to communicate in any fighting game is the monster's threat level. Because in an RPG, usually, not always, but usually, fights are to the death. So how deadly is the thing that I'm about to fight? In older editions of D&D, and even in Pathfinder, you would quickly gauge the level of an enemy, because in those older editions, the enemy would add their literal level to their armor class. So if I'm a level 7 or level 8 and I roll a 22 to hit or 23 to hit and it still misses, okay, now I know, okay, this enemy is adding what, like 8 or 9 to their armor class? They could be much stronger than me. And then with just one attack, I could decide strategically, okay, I might need to retreat. But because everyone has the same armor class in 5e, the designers have yet again put the onus on the DM to provide clarity that should already be inherent in the system. It's the DM's job now to describe and to telegraph. And you can tell that the community knows that this is a problem by the plethora of YouTube videos that you can find teaching game masters how to properly telegraph, how to properly signal how strong a monster is so that they don't one-shot their party. But even if your DM does telegraph effectively, it can't completely compensate for a lack of clarity that should be in the game. The game's literal mechanics leave the player with literally only one metric by which to judge how dangerous a foe is, and that's by how much damage they deal. So this isn't so bad if we're talking about a video game, because let's say a Dark Souls boss one-shots you. You're just gonna respawn at a campfire with the exact same character. But in a TTRPG, you only get one life. And what's even worse is that not even the damage is a reliable metric to use in 5e, because I've had a bad guy be doing 5d12 damage, for instance, right? And I go up against my party, and there's no way really that they can win, but I hit with a multi-attack, 3 attacks, and I do 6 damage, 8 damage, 9 damage. My party's like, oh, okay, this is good. But then a couple rounds later, my dice flip. Now I'm rolling 36, 40 damage, 60 damage. And it feels so bad when it comes out of nowhere. Your players not only feel robbed and it kind of kills the mood, But you know how players, you know how we are, you know, because I play too. You kind of will feel like the DM cheesed you, you know what I'm saying? If all of a sudden you take an 8 damage, 9 damage, 10 damage, and all of a sudden 50 damage comes out of nowhere, you're gonna think that the GM is spiking the numbers, for sure. And the flip side of this coin, which makes it yet worse, is that the players don't get armor class bonuses. So just like the players have a 15 to hit against this armor class of 18, players may only have an armor class of 22. And that's considered pretty high. But is that high when this Kraken has a plus 17 to hit? That means percentage wise, you're gonna be hit 75% of the time for massive damage. And getting hit so frequently has the opposite effect to making you feel like a legendary hero at high levels. You're gonna feel more fragile. And the result is that you go down way more quickly comparatively in late game than you did to the earlier levels. Which is the opposite of really what you want in a game where you're supposed to be leveling up.
But wait! There's more.
Because we haven't even talked about saving throws. It used to be that you added your level to your saving throws, but in 5e's experimental system, that is no longer the case. However, the fact that your saving throws don't increase with time, that is not something that's compensated for or even taken into account at all by the designers, who insist on continuously having the monsters' save DCs scale up as they get stronger. This Kraken has a save DC of 23. So imagine if you had a +0 to your con save, or God forbid, a -1, which is literally still possible even at level 20. Rules as written, it would be impossible for you to pass that saving throw. Now, if your GM house rules that a natural 20 on any D20 roll is always a success, then you have a 5% chance to succeed, which is still a 95% chance of failure, which is essentially an auto failure. And then gameplay, this issue is compounded by the exact nature of why we make saving throws. Because why do we make saving throws? To avoid damage and to avoid negative statuses. Mostly though, we're doing it to avoid the statuses, or the conditions rather. We're doing it to avoid the conditions. And some of the most punishing conditions in D&D, charm, paralysis, stun, they require a saving throw beforehand. So you can see how this quickly becomes an issue when you start to get so high that all of the monsters that you have require a saving throw that is this high. If you only have a +1 or +2, God be with you. And Jesus take the wheel if a +1 or +2 is all that stands between you and paralysis or charm or banish. That could literally be game over. But this is also an issue for the DM because look at this Kraken. It has no charisma. So even if it were targeted by a player, let's say with a save DC of 20, they could completely trivialize this enemy. And this flaw is so glaring, so overt, that even the designers have to address it, though not by fixing their math, but simply by giving the DM the power to just hand wave away any failures that they feel should have been successes, regardless of what the dice say. Now, we've come to know this lovely mechanic as legendary actions, which in of themselves, to me, are the designer's admission on how silly that it is, right? That the base game allows legendary foes such as this Kraken, or even literal gods sometimes, to have the mechanical possibility even to fail a spell against a first level character. But with legendary actions, now the DM can just say, nah, and ignore the dice, which is just so inelegant, and I don't like it at all, because it wastes everybody's time. Why even play D&D if we're just gonna ignore what we rolled? Why even run D&D as a DM if you're gonna roll dice and then completely ignore what they say? I know, it's a mystery to me too. But legendary actions to me reek of a game that ran into a huge design flaw and didn't know how to, or more likely didn't have the time to properly figure it out. No worry, Wizards, though, I fixed this problem for you, but yeah, you're gonna have to wait until the end of the video to see what my solution is. But now I think I've thoroughly debunked the claims that their system makes the characters feel more improved over time. I mean, I think I even stumbled onto an explanation, now that I'm thinking about it, as to why everybody feels that D&D has that quote-unquote sweet spot. You know what I mean? Because at the beginning, you're gonna feel squishy, you're low level, but your enemies are only gonna have a save DC of 10 to 12, a +2 to hit. So even if you suck, you know, as a character, you roll bad, you're still gonna be able to survive. As you get up to that mid-level, that is when you're gonna hit that sweet spot. And I do feel that people intuitively feel when they hit that spot, because after that point, that's when we start to see campaigns start to peter off and stuff. Because once you get to that mid-tier, most enemies, you know, let's say CR8 or CR9 is what the enemies are going to be. You're level 8, you're level 9, you're level 10. At that point, the enemies are going to have a +8 to hit about, which is high, but not so high that an armor class of 20 is obsolete, right? You may have a +0 to a saving throw, but against a save DC of 15, that's still not so bad. You have a 25% chance of success, which is still 1 in 4. It's not abysmal, it's not great. You're gonna feel that you didn't like build that part of your character out, but you're not gonna be made obsolete either. But as we start to go past that point, as we start to go past level 9, past level 10, now that squishiness pendulum will start to swing in the opposite direction, because look at this. Now at level 12, our saving throw may still be a +0, but our monsters now have save DCs of 18 or 19. Our AC is still 20 or 21, but now monsters have a +10 and a +11 to hit. The chance of us saving against those spells is going down. The chances of us getting hit is going up. And by the time we're at the end of our leveling up, we're level 20, the monsters are gonna have a +17 to hit. They're gonna have save DCs of 22 or higher. At that point, you're going to literally feel like you're made of paper. And if you have any poor saving throws, they literally cannot help you at all. It's basically the same as not having them, which will make you feel weaker even though your character sheet is telling you that you're strong. And high level D&D wouldn't be so bad except for the fact that there are no natural ways to boost your defense through character progression, except for the ability score increase, and you only get 5 or 6 of those for all 20 levels. And as a GM, you can start to feel it when a player hasn't like super power gamed or optimized their build, because they start to become a burden in combat. They can't change their build really once they're locked in. So how can a GM compensate for that? What answer does our system leave for that problem? Yeah, you probably guessed it. It's the magic items. But this isn't great either, because you might already know that the DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, is notorious for doing a poor job at instructing GMs on how many magic items to reward, as well as how strong those magic items should be. So now to fix one problem, they've created yet another problem, because now a DM is going to be stuck making sure certain characters don't become obsolete in combat at higher levels just because the player chose not to min-max. And it can put you in a position as a DM where you feel like you have to doctor your player's build, which is not anything any DM should have to do. Plus, with every magic item introduced into the game, from even the tiniest item, can unbalance the game in a completely unpredictable way, which is why I'm never going to give an immovable rod to some of my parties. You know who you are. It's just never going to happen. But at higher levels, the DM is going to literally be forced to not just give out more magic items, but stronger magic items. And with 4 level 15 characters with 3 or 4 magic items apiece, it's impossible to predict, to balance, or plan for how those items are going to interact with each other and with the character's builds, with their spells, with their class feats. It's going to be impossible. And you can be caught on the opposite end of the spectrum, where you're a player who has a glaring hole in their character and you feel frustrated that you literally just cannot find the right magic item for that build. Either way, there's just simply far too much going on. But as we can see with the numbers, it literally has to be this way, because if you do not give out those magic items and those abilities, your players have very little mathematical chance of success. But this solution also compounds another pervasive issue at high levels, which is the slow combat. I mean, look at this item. You thought combat was slow before? Can you imagine a table full of characters all attuned to a magic item looks like this? Yikes. Now, your average player is never going to break down WoTC's design choices and consequences this thoroughly, but the issues are pervasive enough that players just instinctively avoid the high levels. Now, unbounded systems like Pathfinder have built-in mechanisms to keep this sort of weirdness from happening, because your level is added to your armor class and to your saving throws. But I'll talk more about an unbounded system later in the video. But yeah, I think I'm done demolishing this first point. Well, no, because actually, now that I'm looking at this, he does really have the nerve to say that monster attack accuracy doesn't scale. But that's not entirely true, is it? The designers must realize that tougher monsters have to have higher accuracy, because they're still giving high-level monsters crazy bonuses to hit. So while I do get that he's saying that the literal level isn't added, the fact that they're going to crank up the monster's ability scores way above a 20, way more than a player could ever reach, and that they're going to crank up the CR, which determines the proficiency bonus if you didn't know. The challenge rating of the monster determines the proficiency bonus that gets added. So to say that monster accuracy isn't affected by their level when the monster's level still determines the proficiency bonus and gets added to hit, It just feels slightly disingenuous. But next point. He says, non-specialized characters can more easily participate in many scenes. While it's true that increases in accuracy are real and tangible, it also means that characters can achieve a basic level of competence just through how players assign their ability bonuses, and he provides an example below. I think this one really just comes down to preference. By keeping the DCs low and reducing the bonuses given to your skill checks, that's just gonna mean that your skill bonus impacts your success less than the die roll, which just turns 5e into more of a game of chance. So again, what do you prefer, right? Some people really do love a game of chance, and at the heart of a TTRPG, we are rolling dice to randomly determine what happens. That is a game of chance, like shooting craps or playing poker, though with much lower stakes. But in order to understand how bounded accuracy influences D&D's relationship with chance, we are going to have to do that deep dive into the maths that I talked about. So bottoms up. So as you probably know, pretty much all RPGs, even video games, do use some form of dice math, also known as probability, or more colloquially as luck, or even chance. All types of systems run on and rely on probability, but just how much a system utilizes luck does depend on two factors. That is the size of its modifiers and the size of its dice, or rather, how many faces or how many sides that die has. And how much a game does leave its outcomes up to chance is referred to by gamers as its swing. Games that rely very much on probability feel very swingy. That means that you can go from success to failure, hot to cold, very, very quickly. It's literally on the roll of a die. While skill-based games that use a smaller die size and higher skill bonuses has obviously the opposite effect. And I've always been one to learn better with visual aid. I mean, don't talk to me, show me. So let me just try to illustrate this a little bit better. You walk down the hall and you come to a closed door. Now you want to try to listen at that door, so I'm going to call for a DC 16 perception check. Now our difficulty class tells us how many beans we need in order to buy success. In this case, our DC is 16. Our level 1 rogue starts out with a wisdom modifier of +3, and they have expertise in perception as well. So they start out with a +4 for a total of a +7 to their perception skill before they roll anything. Now this is referred to as our skill bonus. So we have our skill bonus, which tells us how many beans we start out with already in our bean account, and our DC tells us how many beans we need in order to buy success. Now the last factor, of course, is the die roll itself. The D20 in this instance tells us how many potential extra beans might be loaned out to us from our die roll in order to help us succeed. So we need 16 to succeed. We start out with 7. Our die roll has a total of 20 that it may give us. Now, in order to figure out our chances of success, all we do is we subtract our bonus from the DC. The difference between these two numbers is what's going to tell us our percentage of success. The difference is also how many beans we're going to need our D20 to loan us. So if we take our bonus, we subtract it from the total, what we're left with is 9 beans. Now, if we take 9 beans from our stack and add it to our bonus, that leaves us with 11 beans in this pile. 11 divided by the maximum of 20 is 0.55 or 55%. And for everybody who also knows that the D20, every side equals 5%, well then 5% times 11 is also 55%. So in this scenario, using D&D 5e, our level 1 rogue is going to have about a 55% chance. Now, I know that some people probably have some power builds and they can push their perception past this, but your average player isn't going to know about those. So straight out of the box, this is what we're looking at, about a 55% chance. Now, further down the spectrum, we have other games, skill-based games like Cyberpunk. Now, it utilizes basically the same difficulty ranges as D&D, but instead uses very, very high skill modifiers and only a D10 randomizer. Yeah, that's right, only a D10. So let's run this same scenario, but through the red engine, which emphasizes the importance of skills and less emphasis on luck. So Cyberpunk doesn't really have classes. They have a rank 4 Netrunner is what I'm going to be starting with, which is essentially Cyberpunk's version of a level 1 character. And so our Netrunner comes up to the door. they need to see what's on the other side, they make their perception check. And of course, the DC remains a DC or a DV of 16. Now, our Netrunner has a max intelligence of +8 and a perception skill of +6, giving her a total of +14 at first level.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
Our DC or DV is going to remain the same, 16, but we're already starting out with 14 beans in our bean account. So in order to buy success, we're only going to need a loan of an additional 2 beans, leaving 8 behind. And 8 divided by 10 equals 80%. And if every side of a D10 is 10%, then 10 times 8 also equals 80%. And you can clearly see how much more a skill-based game like Cyberpunk rewards you for maximizing your skills. Now, sort of in between these two systems, we have something like Pathfinder, which adds high skill bonuses to a large die size. So here at level 1, at the most extreme, I've been able to get my rogues statted out for a +15 to their perception at level 1. And of course, our DC remains 16. I start with 15, which means I only need a loan of 1 bean from my D20. And there are no rules that say that you will fail if you roll a natural 1. So in this particular situation where I have a minimum roll of 1, I'm gonna automatically succeed. Now, cool thing about Pathfinder is that as I level up, I would actually be adding my level to my skill bonus. So let's say that instead our DC was a DC 30. So in this case, at level 1 with the +15 to my perception, if I wanted to succeed, I would need a loan of 15 beans from my die roll, which would only give me a 25% chance to succeed. But as my level increases, I would actually be adding more beans to my bonus for every time that I level up. So at level 1, yeah, I only have a +15, right? But at level 6, I'd have a +20. At level 11, I'd have a +25. At level 16, I would have literally a +30 for what is already an auto pass. So it can really feel rewarding in a system like this to level up because your progression can feel very smooth. A level 1 character is going to have a harder time achieving something of this magnitude, much harder time than a higher level character will. But the issues start to arise when the DC start to get as high as 50 or even 60. Yeah, you heard me right. And even characters will start to have skill bonuses of 30 or even 40 and beyond. And it's just so many beans. Eventually, you get to the point where you can't really play this without bringing out the old TI-81. And this is a huge critique of these Unbounded systems. You quickly lose the simplicity and the elegance of this, or this, and all of this. Lastly, we have games that rely almost completely on chance. These are games such as Dungeon Crawl Classics, which actually only uses modifier ranges of -3 to +3, and doesn't even use skill modifiers at all, just raw ability modifiers. And it uses a D10 for unskilled checks, or a D20 for skilled checks. So our thief gets to the door and they want to make a check. Same DC as before, DC 16. And we are going to be using the D20 for our check, not the D10, because we are skilled as a rogue. And so in this particular instance though, with a +0 to our score, the only thing that we can do is hope that we get the entire loan of 16 from our die, which would leave us with the remainder of only 4 beans left, giving us 4 divided by 20, an abysmal 20% chance of success. Though it is worthy to note that DCC is built so that characters do have terrible chances of success, and that makes the luck stat more relevant, so you have to rely on that. So this game is literally designed for these types of odds. But side by side, now you can see the varying systems and how they handle chance. If you're a player that often finds yourself very annoyed and you have your fun ruined by how often things go wrong because of bad rolls, then I actually recommend something like Cyberpunk. Something that's going to have a high skill modifier and is going to use a small die size. It's going to be a lot less random and a lot less shenanigans. However, some people want something that's much looser even than D&D. And if you want something that is more random and is more shenanigan-y, then I would definitely suggest Dungeon Crawl Classics, because that is a great place to land. Now, Bounded Accuracy limits skill progression by eliminating the addition of levels because they wanted to avoid all of this that you get in Pathfinder. The result is that they use a proficiency bonus, and the result of that proficiency bonus is that at the highest level, without magic or any kind of augmentations, the most that you're going to be able to get your skill to is a plus 11. This is the highest stat that you're going to be able to get, even in the late game, which means that our strongest and most capable roll, and our most powerful, we're still going to be eclipsed by the power of the D20 by 9 points. So this represents the maximum skill bonus that we can get naturally without magic items or spells or anything like that. This represents the most beans that our die can give us towards success. And this represents the difference between 9 beans is the difference between our maximum stat and our D20 roll, which means that luck or the die roll eclipses our skill, even at our strongest, by 9 beans or about 45%. And this is what actually equates to that one hard reality that everyone in D&D just kind of accepts. And that's that your skill will not matter if you roll a bad roll. Like if you have a plus 11 to your skill, but you still roll a 2 or a 3, you're gonna fail. Now the interesting thing is that with a rogue, we can get this 11 up to a plus 17 with expertise, making the difference between our 17 and our 20 only 3 beans, which cuts down this huge margin of luck, this weirdness where our skill can be eclipsed by our roll, and reduces it down to only 3 beans or 15%. And I think that something is conspicuously hilarious about Wizards' own admission that the rogue class has the highest satisfaction rating of any other class in D&D, is that because it's the class that's going to be robbed least by a bad roll, something that's going to be further aided actually by the reliable talent class feat, which literally restricts the luck factor by 50%. You can't roll less than a 10, which actually means we would add another 10 beans to this pile for an overwhelming plus 27 to our roll as a rogue before we even roll the die. And funnily enough, this is exactly the same kind of skill bonus, a plus 27, that we could expect to see on a character in Pathfinder or Cyberpunk. So it is beyond ironic to me that die-hard D&D folks will refuse to play Pathfinder, yet by their own admission, the class that they like the most is much closer maths-wise to the kind of character that you would be playing in Pathfinder.
Interesting. Interesting.
That's just some food for thought. Next point. With your support in the channel, please do like and subscribe if you like anything you've heard here, and do consider joining the Patreon because YouTube, man, they don't pay me nothing for these videos. Now, I know that they're showing commercials on my videos because even I have to watch commercials to look at my own videos, believe it or not. But when it comes to paying me anything,
You get nothing. Good day, sir.
so if you do want to support, definitely do check out the Patreon, where you get some free monthly content as well as a real voice on the kind of content that I make here. Let's move on. The DM's monster roster expands, never contracts. I have some very spirited thoughts about this one. We'll come back to it. Bounded accuracy makes it easier to DM, and easier to adjudicate improvised scenes. That's a bold claim. After a short period of DMing, DMs should gain a clear sense of how to assign DCs to various tasks. If the DM knows that for most characters a DC of 15 is a difficult task, then the DM starts to associate DC values with in-world difficulties. Thus, when it comes time to improvise, a link has been created between the difficulty of the challenge in-world, you can read that part if you want to in parentheses, and the target number. False. That's just totally false. This is a very worthy design goal though, as pretty much all of these are. However, let's actually look at the work that they've done and see it in practice. Now, when we look at this stat block, we can see that they set a target number of 18 to hit a CR2 creature. So let's say I was a brand new DM, knowing really nothing about D&D except that the max level is 20. Let's say I know that. I would naturally just assume then, looking at the stat block, that 18 is a pretty low roll, because that's all you need to hit a level 2 monster. Now, as you realize that this 18 is the exact same effort needed to hit the Kraken, that's gonna cause some major consternation for the DM, because just what the fuck does 18 mean then? The vagueness that's inherent in this engine has the opposite effect of making things easier for the DM. There's this huge gap between fighting an orc, fighting a Kraken, And in that space, there are literally hundreds, thousands of activities or actions that may be taken, all of which then should be or could be reasonably represented with a DC of 18, which is going to result in a system where the DM is literally having to kind of feel out what the right DCs are moment to moment, because there are not going to be any solid bases. I guarantee you that, because the Game Master Guide does not give you any solid basis really for how to use the DCs, which is going to lead to another issue that D&D has, which is inconsistent game quality from table to table, as in how good it feels to play a game of D&D is almost 100% comes down to your DM. It has nothing to do with the game itself, because the system is just kind of loosey-goosey. Now, to be fair, this actually can really work for seasoned DMs, because that lack of structure gives a lot of room for creativity. But for most people, the DM is going to feel like 5e just puts a lot of pressure on them to make it work, and they're going to burn out before their campaign is halfway done. So in my opinion, this aspect of 5e is what helps contribute to 5es or D&Ds in general, their DM deficiency. This is why nobody wants to run it. Not even long-time players who've been playing for a long time, not even they want to run it, because they inherently just know how much of a challenge it would be. Now, Cyberpunk Red, as I talked about earlier, does take the opposite approach, because it has a very clear DV chart and descriptions for what each difficulty means, as well as descriptions on the literal skills themselves to help the GM adjudicate and to allow not only just the GM, but the players to know exactly what a character should be capable of at that level. No ambiguity. This makes it way easier for the GM to just make fair checks on the fly, and for the player to always have a reasonable idea of what their character should be capable of in that moment, so you don't have those players going, well, you know, can I just try to, you know, and they try to do stuff that's literally like they know that's kind of stretching it. This makes it so it's just fair, and you as the DM don't have to balance so much. But yeah, we're done beating that horse. On to the next one. It opens up new possibilities of encounter and adventure design, and this goes hand in hand with the other point that I skipped out on earlier. So I'll start with that one. The DM's monster roster expands, never contracts. Although low-level characters probably don't stack up well against higher-level monsters thanks to the high hit points and high damage numbers of those monsters, as characters gain levels, the lower-level monsters continue to be useful to the DM, just in greater numbers. Remember that. While we might fight only 4 goblins at first level, we might take on 12 of them at 5th level without breaking a sweat. Now let's go on down to this next one. It says, it opens up new possibilities of encounter and adventure design. A first level character might not fight the black dragon plaguing the town face to face and expect to survive. But if they rally the town to their side, outfit the guards with bows and arrows, and whittle the dragon down with dozens of attacks instead of only 4 or 5, the possibilities grow. And actually, I have to say that this design goal right here sounds fucking epic. An entire town rallied in this epic fight against a dragon that's flying overhead, blowing up buildings, roasting people alive, and they're all coming together, and the players have to work with that town, equip themselves properly, and now they stand a chance. That is literally the storytelling that I live for. And so this design goal got me really excited. And it's actually something that I really wanted to test using the system as they wrote. And so I did my own little experiment. And the results might shock you, because I did a little digging. And in Raw 5e, there are really no rules for running large groups, which is strange because they obviously have massive combat in their design goals. They wanted that to be possible, but there are no real rules for it. So that's strange. So rules is written. And as intended, I just ran each commoner as their own stat block. I even set up a map with commoners and guards, a total of 24 different stat blocks, and then I used an adult red dragon stat block and did a simulation attack on the town. Now I did 3 different simulations, and on each run, nearly 95% of the commoners all failed their saving throw against the frightening presence, so most of them were rolling with disadvantage after the first round anyway. In my last instance, however, I made a point of surprising the dragon and also put it last in the initiative. Now this was by far the best round of combat for the town, for the villagers, out of all of the rounds of combat that there were. There were 24 different attack rolls, and they managed to rack up 44 points of damage. However, anytime the dragon was able to act, essentially that fight was over. With legendary actions and getting up to 6 attacks per round, and with strategic breath attacks, I was able to kill as many as 6 or 7 NPCs at once. And in 4 rounds of combat, most everybody was dead. So while this design goal is nice in theory, in practice, my guesstimation based on my math is that it would take about 4 dozen individual guards, stat blocks, making precisely 48 attack rolls per round to kill or harm a dragon enough to make it flee, which admittedly sounds very fucking cool. A 50v1 versus a dragon with the party, that is epic. The issue is that 5e doesn't provide a practical method of running such a massive combat, even if that is awesome. So you have an entire town take on a dragon, right? You want that to happen, so what? The DM is now supposed to run a track of 48 individual NPCs on the battlefield, rules as written? That's ridiculous. And even if you had a computer for a brain and you could keep track of it all, would you even really want to? So our author here is dead right. The low-level NPCs, surprisingly enough, are still useful at higher levels in higher numbers. The issue is that the numbers have to be so high that it becomes impractical for the DM to run. And the fact that mass combat is not very well covered in D&D is also evidenced by the fact that there are dozens of YouTube videos all over the place about how to run groups, mobs, hordes. And so here we can see yet another major flaw in 5e that has been exacerbated by how bounded accuracy runs in the background. Because this isn't overt, this is, the game is built on top of this system. So in the background, it's causing this issue. This is, in my opinion, an overcompromise, because they wanted to have a game where a village could take on a dragon, and they created that game. They did. However, no sane DM would ever run a combat of 48 villagers versus with a party versus a dragon. I mean, and I did half that, right? But only for you guys. And I don't recommend it because I definitely can't vouch for my sanity after the experience. Before, sure, but definitely not now. The whole thing was one of the longest 2 hours of my life. 24 stat blocks just rolling, me just playing with myself, by myself. He continues, saying that it's easier for the players and DMs to understand the relative strength and difficulty of things. Under the bounded accuracy system, a DM can describe a hobgoblin wearing chainmail, and no matter what the level of the characters, a player can reasonably guess that the hobgoblin's AC is around 15. The description of the world matches up to mechanical expectations, and eventually players will see chainmail or leather armor or plate mail in game and have an instinctive response to how tough things are. Well, I would actually say that this is a fundamental fallacy, because in any tabletop RPG game, the GM, the game master, the dungeon master has complete and arbitrary control over the world and how tough the monsters are. They can decide that leather armor is as tough as plate if they want to. They have the right to change anything. But even if your GM doesn't change the numbers, just when we're playing 5e, you know how many items and magic items and spells and illusions that there are. Any seasoned player knows that no, you actually can't look at any monster and reasonably guess how strong they are, nor should you try to, because assumptions will get you killed. The only real assumption that a veteran player should have is that everything is dangerous. Plate armor, leather armor, no armor. But what he's saying here just really does go back into what I was talking about earlier, in that the system doesn't clearly communicate threat levels of enemies. And here he's literally expressing a clear desire to relay that information cleanly to the players, because any game designer is going to know that that is important in a fighting game. The issue isn't that their intention was wrong. The issue is that this experiment they just didn't quite pull it off. But I will get into my fix at the end of the video. And lastly, bounded accuracy is good for verisimilitude. The bounded accuracy system lets us perpetually associate difficulty numbers with certain tasks based on what they are in the world without a need to constantly escalate the story beyond those tasks. Basically, you can keep the threats more grounded, more real world. Things don't have to be the end of the world, the end of the galaxy, the end of the universe. You're going to be able to have more personalized stories because the numbers aren't going to get so bloated. And that's a great design goal, because it is the personal stories that resonate the most with us. So this does show that they intended to provide that balanced experience all the way through, from the very first level of play to the very last level of play. But then why is it then that the high levels of D&D are so bad, so broken? Well, first, my thoughts on this. After a deep dive, I give 5e a GM grade of a C+. There's a lot here, and there's a lot of great stuff for beginners, but if you're brand new, it's gonna make you work real hard. And that may be enough to deter a lot, if not most, DMs from coming back to DMing. As a player, I give it a B-. It's good, but not great in terms of how it feels to play, and it becomes actively worse the higher level you get past level 8. Starting with my own philosophy, I looked at their homework and I came up with my own conclusion, which is that their design goals are top tier. This is exactly the kind of design that you want. This is exactly the kind of game that I would like to play. They want to keep their numbers under control. Unlike Pathfinder, they want to provide verisimilitude. They want that difficulty to be there at the beginning, but for you to not feel useless as a player. That is good, and I love this design. However, what I came to the conclusion of is that their flaw in implementation comes from their system's under implementation. They went slightly too far, uncoupling your levels from all of your different ability scores that you should be improving, as time goes on, as you level up. And like most things, the perfect answer isn't to the left or to the right. It isn't unbounded or bounded accuracy, but somewhere in the middle. And that is where I've landed. So I've coined my own system, Unbounded Proficiency. This is an iteration or an evolution of what they've already came up with, leaning into that 5e DNA. And so what I've done is take the proficiency bonus, add it to everything it normally goes to, but we also add it to all of our saving throws and to our armor class. This makes it so that as players get higher in level, their character passively improves at defending themselves in combat. Applying our proficiency bonus can then also act as a literal, mathematical, and mechanical representation of the experience that we've gained in battle. Because not only will our accuracy go up as it does rules as written, but our ability to block and parry, or however you want to kind of flavor that for your own character, that armor class is going to be going up. So they're better at hitting, they're also better at defending. And I've been testing this with my players and they absolutely love it. As your spellcasters get stronger, as your players just get stronger in general, when they're higher level, those spell effects that hit them are going to be way easier to overcome as opposed to at lower levels, and they're going to feel that progression. And this applies to the monsters too, because monsters get proficiency bonuses as well. So the higher the CR, the higher their AC is going to be, and the higher their own saving throws are going to be. And so where in 5e rules as written, our level 20 wizard goes from this with their armor class and their saving throws to this in my Unbounded proficiency system. Our Kraken and our Orog go from this to this. Now side by side, we can see the mechanical difference between the two. And this is just a single, really easy tweak, and is a very elegant math-based solution that isn't a whole bunch of homebrew, isn't a whole bunch of paragraphs written, and is designed to run in the background to improve how smooth and how good the gameplay feels without getting in the way of the character or without even stressing out the DM or making them think about anything extra. This fixes the first issue of an ambiguous enemy difficulty. However, because it's not adding the whole level, the numbers, the armor class is not going to be, 35 or anything like that. It's still going to be a pretty good number that your players can hit. This is also a change that's easily calculated because it's just using the monster's proficiency bonus, which is already added to things on a stat block. The cool thing too is that this works for the players. As they get stronger, they're less fragile. And the saving throw that they are proficient with, the saving throws they're proficient with, those quickly become expertise. So the things that you are proficient with, you get extra bonus to that, but your general saves, you're still getting stronger. Because by the time you reach level 10, you cannot tell me that there is no way you got better at defending yourself against a fireball than when you were 3rd level. There's just no way. You will be faster, you will be stronger, you will have more constitution, even if not a lot. And so this adequately mimics and simulates that. So you can more easily tell how difficult your enemies are by how hard they are to hit. You can more easily defend yourself too, so you yourself get stronger as you level up, as is what they intended. This also fixes the issue of reliance on magic items, because you no longer have to worry about, I have to give my player this magic item that boosts their ability score by +2 so that they can get a +1 so their armor class can go up by 1. You don't have to worry about all of that. You can literally just let them get stronger, and a player who hasn't min-maxed will still have usable bonuses just by leveling up. This simple tweak also makes it so that, at least when it comes to combat, you're not going to feel like the DCs are arbitrary. This is going to make it much easier for a GM to homebrew monsters too that scale properly for the group that they're fighting. They're not going to be worried about, oh, the armor class is too low, now my monster's getting hit all the time. How many hit points do I have to give them? This also allows you to scale down your monsters, because if they have a higher AC, they don't have to have so many hit points. Because let's compare this golem from 3rd edition versus this golem from 5th edition, and let's look at how high that armor class is, but look how few hit points it has. Now in 5th edition, they know that it's too easy to hit everything, and that's why they give everything a huge bag of hit points. Taking away the ease with which the players can hit means that you can half your hit points, or even quarter them. Make it so that it's hard to hit, but when they hit, it is devastating to that monster that they're fighting. That makes combat feel more realistic. That adds to the verisimilitude. And this keeps it so that at every level of play, your characters never have to worry about growing obsolete. Your player never has to worry about the character they made at 1st level being literally mechanically useless by 12th level. And optionally, we've also experimented with adding a flat proficiency bonus to all damage. What this does is it makes it so that your accuracy to hit plus your flat damage are equal. So if you have a plus 11 to hit naturally, then you also deal an additional plus 11 damage. This has proven very effective and making my high level characters feel badass, because a level 15 character doesn't stab the same way that a level 1 character does. They do that extra damage. It's about the experience that they've gotten. That knife digs in at the angle that they didn't know even existed at 1st level. They're able to get in between those ribs. They stabbed so many people. How could they not do more damage? It is the same way that a veteran boxer is capable of taking out someone who's younger simply because their technique is better. They may not even be hitting harder, but they're doing more damage. The fact that this applies to both the NPCs too, it makes it feel fair. A 10th level character is gonna be doing way more damage. And if they come across a CR1 creature, even a gang of them, a single player is gonna be able to jump into the fray like Batman and just start whooping ass, taking people out left and right with one hit. Even a player with a negative to their strength may still be knocking people out because they're adding their proficiency bonus to any damage they do. Meaning that even a weak, high-level character is able of taking out a strong, low-level character simply because they have so much more experience on them. And that feels great and rewards the players for leveling up, and they absolutely love it. And so yeah, that's it. That's my fix. That's my solution to D&D's broken math. Send it out to Wizards. Maybe they can hack this in before the next edition comes out so that it too can be a playable edition from level 1 to level 20. Because as of right now, they're just porting it in and building on top of this system, which means that these issues that I just pointed out, which are numerous, which are many, they are going to carry forward into the next edition. But please do send this out. Maybe they see it, maybe they make some changes. And do send this to some other content creators. I would love to get this out to Professor Dungeon Master, the Dungeon Coach, Bob World Builder. See what those guys think about my math fix here. See if they agree with or disagree with my solution. See if they think that it's as elegant as I think it is. You know, and let me know in the comments if it's gonna be something that you try at your table. I highly recommend it. Using that proficiency bonus, which they've designed, which I think is a very elegant mechanic, and just pushing that to the max. Letting the characters level up naturally, really fully feel the power that comes from their level up. And then not having to award so many magic items, not having to have the DM try to fix so many things on the fly, and just letting the game do the work. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. Like and subscribe if you did like the video. If you didn't, also you can tell me that too down below in the comments. Please do consider joining the Patreon. And if you live in the Tucson area, I do run games every single Monday at the Isle of Games. So if you happen to be in Arizona, even, you know, just visiting some family, you come on over on a Monday, you will find me there running games. So if you want to hop in and play with me in person, that's where to do it. And I am a professional game master, so please do find me and start playing games. Anybody who has subscribed to the channel and who also sends me the code that you see on your screen right now will get a discount on their first 2 sessions with me. And so I hope to see you all there. Stay safe, look after each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one.